An important topic to consider when it comes to your spiritual practice is how you deal with your family. Some of us don't have a problem with that, meaning that it's no issue to deal with one's family. You're able to meditate, you're able to read your spiritual texts, you're able to go on retreats all you want, and everyone's happy, everyone's fulfilled. But not everyone's blessed in that regard. Oftentimes, family have their own ideas, their own belief systems, their own faith, and should you have one of a different flavor, that can really ruffle some feathers. And that's normal because, again, we live in a very tribal kind of world where if you think different than someone else, it can be very threatening. So this plays a big role in regards to our capacity to practice our spiritual work, do our spiritual duty, to meditate well. It doesn't have to be a problem. Now, there is the theory and there is the practice in relationship to dealing with family. Theoretically, let's look to some spiritual greats who said things like, you know what, if you want to know the kingdom of heaven, leave your family behind, and that's that. Or let's think of another spiritual great who was the king of a kingdom, obviously, because he's a king, had a queen, had a new child, and got up in the middle of the night and left them. All right? I'm sure there's other instances of that too. And it all teaches a story, it's all a metaphor or a parable of that idea that if you really truly, if your real goal is clarity, is peace, and you're part of a family structure that does not allow you to explore that, what's the solution? From these extremist spiritual greats, it's to get up and leave. How many of you are going to do that? Probably not so many. So what do we do in that situation? Well, we need to remember the whole idea of attachment and aversion. From the Yoga Sutras, pretty much every spiritual tradition I know of has this idea that we need to let go of our attachments and our aversions, because only by exploring our attachments and our aversions and releasing them consciously, will we ever truly be free internally? Will we ever be truly tranquil and content? Will we ever really be able to gain that grand vision of whatever your concept of God or divinity is? And that applies to family. I recently saw a quote, I don't remember who said it or where it came from, but it was about attachment and aversion. And essentially what it said was, attachments, having things is not the problem. It's when those things control you that is the problem. All right, so we have to keep this in mind and think about this. So these are some ideas relating to family that are more theoretical. Now, do you have the capacity to up and leave and just dedicate your life solely to what you consider to be a spiritual path? Well, sure you do. What's the thing that keeps you from doing it? Your attachments and your aversions, letting people down, not recognizing that everyone and everything is a divine infinite consciousness. You focus on blood, and you say, oh, they're my blood, so therefore they're more important. There you go. You've just created a division. You've just said that this person is more important than this person. You've just made a judgment. And again, this is natural because we live in a very tribal world, which was good for the survival of the species. It's excellent to think tribally for the survival of the species. It's excellent to think tribally for the survival of a family. It's excellent to think tribally for the survival of a group. But we're not here to support a group. We're not here to keep a family going. We're here to realize, experience directly our natural state as an expression of an abstract intelligence, a divine consciousness, which our little minds keep trying to perceive. But really we have to just let go of ourselves into. That's what's going on here. Now, it may be that you're in a situation where family are just ignorant, cruel, difficult people. It's possible. It happens all the time. in that kind of situation, it may be very helpful for you to move across the country or to cut off your ties with them. And sure, maybe there are certain psychological things that you have to work through with those family members. But the question comes down to this. Do you need to put yourself through abusive situations in order to work through those things? Do you need to go through and rehash hundreds of years of family history and curses and baggage and bad karma? Or do you say, this is where I've come from. I honor that, I appreciate that, but I don't intend to continue this. And so I step out of that, and I'm going to put my attention on what I want to know, what I want to contemplate, who I want to be as a vessel for this divine, infinite, abstract intelligence. You have to make that decision. And sometimes that's not an easy decision to make, because guilt is a very powerful energetic snag or tie or binding mechanism. So it's very easy for family and friends and things of this nature to tie you down with guilt by saying, well, how can you do this? Don't you know I'm part of your family? I'm your blood. And one of the phrases I always like to use is, most people are blinded by blood. They're blinded by blood. Because if they would take a step back and they would look at the people that are their family, and they would ask themselves, if I met this person 2 days from now, and I'm thinking to myself, would I want to be their friend or even really participate in their life experiences? Would I? And if the answer is no, you're probably blinded by blood. But if you step back and you see family or friends and you ask yourself, if I would meet this person without knowing anything about them, without knowing they're a relative, and I think to myself, I would like to participate in the path that this person is walking. I would like to be friends and family with this individual, and you say yes, well, that's a clear indication that maybe you're not blinded by blood. You just happen to share the same path as the people that are part of your family. But once you're an adult, once you are no longer being taken care of by family members, you need to, if possible, be able to take responsibility for yourself. Earn your own money. Don't depend on your family. It's possible. Now again, maybe other cultures are different in that you have to depend on your family. But from talking with many, many people, I have seen countless individuals rise from very oppressive family situations, spiritually speaking, where they were under the yoke of another family member due to financial obligations or just guilt, and they were able to work themselves out of that. Now, how do you do that? I have no idea. It's going to be different for everybody. How I approach it is very different than how you would approach it, because your personality is different. My personality is different. Our paths are different. But the whole idea is here that you don't want to be blinded by blood. And sometimes it takes a very hard stance to get out of that. And there might be a lot of pain involved. There might be a lot of letting go, grieving involved. But you have to ask yourself this question. Am I interested in inner peace and tranquility so that I can contemplate and realize that aspect of divinity as I see it, fully, completely, beyond the mind, even beyond my concepts? Is that important to me? Are my family relationships, who invite me over and make me feel guilty for not eating their garlic-filled pasta or eating their spare ribs, who make me feel guilty, and so I do, and therefore it gets in the way of my meditation? Or when I go and visit family and they're always arguing, and that's all I can think about for the next 4 days is how horrible that experience was. And so I can't contemplate well, I can't meditate well. If your goal is clarity and tranquility, you have to win that, which means you have to let go of attachments, blood attachments and otherwise, that keep you from having the strength and the capacity to meditate and contemplate well. If you don't have that problem, and your family is perfectly supportive of you, and you can meditate, and you can contemplate, and you're tranquil, and you're not caught up in family drama all the time, well, don't even worry about it. Really, if you've paid attention to the previous videos within this series on a Kriya Yoga Meditation Beginner's Guide, hopefully you're seeing that the bottom line is Are you living your life in a supportive fashion? And are there people around you that are supportive of your capacity to wake up? And whatever it takes for you to do that, you have to do it. You have to do it. And remember, there will always be people that say things like, oh, well, you should love us all equally. Why would you say that you are a spiritual person when you can't even spend time with your brother or your sister? And I get that logic, but we also have to remember that an individual may not be strong enough yet to actually see their dysfunctional family or their aggressive family or their guilt-ridden family as an aspect of God, divine consciousness, in a weakened state. But if they get away from family, if they get away from people that beat them down or get in the way of their spiritual practice, if they get away from it and as years go by, they get stronger, then they're able to go back to their family with more maturity, with more clarity, with more energy, with more peace. So yes, they can see that their alcoholic brother who makes fun of them and is derisive and talks about political things that are offensive to the individual, they can see them as, oh yes, that's my brother, in the same way that they would see someone on the street as equally deserving of love. But it might require a time period of distance for the individual to learn to become strong, to contemplate, to really see truthfully that their family, their friends, everyone, no matter how dysfunctional or how functional they are, is an aspect of this divine infinite consciousness. But you don't want to fall into the trap or be guilted into or blood blinded by people who just want to keep you in a loop of, codependence, or who want to keep you in a loop of being in an energetic weakened state so that you never escape that little circle of dysfunction that they have. And again, this whole idea of being blood blind, always remember, think about the people you spend time with. If you're an adult, you have the right to choose who you spend time with. If anyone makes you feel guilty for not spending time with them, or if anyone tries to control you through things like finances or whatever it might be, that's an indication to me that there's an unhealthy dynamic going on there. It might be good for you to get some distance from it. And again, it might require, as I've always said, to work with a counselor, someone who can see objectively what's really going on there. I remember one of the first counseling sessions I had before we got married. The minister required that we went through premarital counseling, and he did something called family systems, which allows you to kind of go back and review your family history and your future spouse's family history, and to see where is the dysfunction, where are the patterns, so that you're able to say, now I know why these things happen. Now I know why you act that way. Now I know why I act this way. Now I know every time I get around so-and-so, this occurs. So trying to find someone that can help you gain that distance, gain that objectivity. Yes, it may be that you step away from your family that are getting in the way of your spiritual practice. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you want to go to school to be an engineer, you have to leave home probably to go to that school to be an engineer. If you want to have the capacity to see God, divine consciousness, the abstract infinite intelligence and everything, you might have to go away from the people you've been raised with to get the distance, the perspective, so that that is possible for you. So it's no different than anything else. So if your family gets in the way of your hopes, your desires, your dreams, and other situations, they're probably going to do the same thing for you in relationship to your spirituality. And I'm speaking from this not only from my own personal experience, but also from the experiences of many people that I've worked with. Luckily, I've had a very, I would not say easily trainable family, but I've had a trainable family, which means that when I became an adult, I moved away. I took my spirituality very seriously. Whenever situations would arise that would prevent me from being able to focus on that, I would remove myself from the situation. And of course, it caused a lot of hurt feelings. It caused a lot of grief and frustration and anger. But as the years went by, I love my family, and they realized that it was more important to have me in their life than not. And so they began to acknowledge, look, this is important to Ryan, so I'm not going to belittle him for these things. I'm not going to make a big issue about these things. We may think about things differently, but that's okay, because we are people. right? And all of us deserve respect. My grandmother, I talk about her in that book, A Course in Tranquility, that I wrote. She's not with us anymore, but she was a devout Catholic, and I might have already talked about it in one of these videos. But when I got involved in Kriya Yoga meditation, she was really concerned. She thought to herself, is this a cult he's getting involved with? And yeah, it probably was a little bit of a cult. I mean, any little group like that is cult-like, right? So she had reason to be concerned. But the funny thing was, is she started to see that I became more peaceful, more supportive, kinder. And despite the fact I wasn't saying my Hail Marys or Our Fathers anymore, she let it ride. And one day on EWTN, the Catholic channel, they started using the word meditation. And so then she started thinking, oh, well, maybe this is okay. And I remember one of the final things she had said before she passed was, well, I guess if you're a good person, it's okay. You might not necessarily be Catholic anymore, but it's okay. And to put this into perspective, this is just a really short video. I'm talking as though my personal trek through family issues was easy, that it happened overnight. It might seem that way, but this was years, okay? This was years of saying, no, I don't really want to eat meat. This was years of saying, I don't want garlic on that. This was years of saying, I'm going to bed early to meditate. This was years of saying, no, I don't want to discuss that with you because it's not important to me. So there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of difficulty involved with it. But as I mentioned, it seems that overall, my experience, as long as I was disciplined about it and I was consistent with my approach of really describing what was important for me to be able to attend to my spiritual duties, what my boundaries were, 5, 6, 10 years, they began to recognize that. And whereas before, if I would be involved in family situations, it would throw me into a total tizzy, anxiety and all these sorts of things, and I had to avoid it when I was much, much, much younger. Well, now I can participate in pretty much any family gathering, family situation. I don't necessarily choose to a lot because I'm just naturally a reclusive individual, but it's fine. I can be a part of their life. They can be a part of my life. We can go on vacations together. We can play games together. We can have little disagreements, and I don't take it so seriously anymore. But that was a good 10 to 15 years of training, all right? And not everyone's going to have that situation. There are many people in my family that I don't talk to because of the stance I've taken, and I've been very clear on my boundaries of what's important to me. And I've seen that happen often with other people too. So you really have to think deeply about what is important to you. If family and tribalism is the most important thing to you, fine, nothing wrong with that. Just admit it. If clarity, inner peace, being able to be a proper vessel for this infinite abstract intelligence is important to you, you have to define what your boundaries are and live up to them. And if other people don't respect them, well then, there's your answer. But you also have to respect their boundaries too. So this is a mutual thing here. But what we have to see is that dealing with family is not something easily overlooked when it comes to our spiritual practice. Dealing with family is very important because again, it is family, it is those early childhood experiences, those early bonds, that tribal mentality, that energetic connection to DNA, which can really hinder a person's path, especially if they are making themselves suffer or not giving themselves proper permission to do what they need to do for their own personal work. And again, when it comes down to it, you have to figure it out. You have to think about what is important to you, and you have to figure out, what do I need to do to make this happen? So it's no different than anything else in life. And you also have to be prepared for consequences. It may be that certain family members never talk to you again. It just might be the way it goes. It may be that you are never really able to spend much time with certain family members because they just never leave it alone. But until you are strong enough in yourself to actually truly see them as divine consciousness, as this infinite aspect of God, which everything is, to see everyone equally, you might have to put some restrictions on your interactions with family. It just might have to be done. Otherwise, you'll just keep spinning your wheels, and you'll keep wondering why you never make any progress with meditation. You're always thinking about negative experiences with family, or you're always caught up in guilt and codependency, and you never seem to move forward. So this is not giving permission to treat family members poorly. This is not a permission to escape from things that you really need to be responsible for and deal with within your life. But it is a speech, I suppose, to encourage you to think a lot about family and realize that at the end of the day, when it comes to self-realization, family is no more or less important than anyone else in the world, right? Equal vision is what happens when you wake up. And when you have equal vision, everyone is treated like family. And that doesn't mean that you go out of your way to be codependent or to be abused by them. Because if everyone's going to be treated like family, well then, respect and boundaries are just as important between you and them as anyone else. So you can still love someone, but not get engaged in their behavior or their life path. That's up to you. You choose whose path you become involved with. And that is your right to do that. So consider this when you're thinking about dealing with family, spiritually speaking. It's a complex web, and at the end of the day, you really have to have a good long contemplative session with yourself and talk with yourself. And then you have to be very disciplined about carrying it out, about, is family getting in your way? If not, no problem, don't worry about it. If it is, how can you address that? How can you say to them, this is important to me, this is where it's going wrong? And oftentimes you don't even really want to say it, you just need to adjust your behavior. And if they ask, well, why aren't you coming to our family events anymore? Why aren't you doing this? Well, maybe tell them. Maybe they'll change. Of course, in the beginning, they might bitch and moan about it. But if you're persistent and they really love you and they really want you to be a part of their group, then they might say, all right, well, I guess we have to respect this, and that, this person in our family is a little bit different than we are. So these are my general thoughts on family. I don't think they're really that deep. I think they're fairly obvious, and I think if you study other people's thoughts on family and spirituality, going back to the masters, you might see some similar thoughts there. And that's by no means to encourage anyone to think I'm a master. I'm just a person who likes talking about this stuff, who's done some work on my own, who's trying to inspire others to also take up the task. So don't get any of that in your head, and you don't have to send me any emails about that because you've already done that enough. All right. So anyway, consider this, and hopefully it will help you, encourage you, to draw you closer to your own capacity for self-realization.